Will policy change? Will doing business get any easier between these two nations?
Thank you so much. No, I think the previous speaker is right. I think the talk out of Xi Jinping is trying to signal that China is open to business, but I think words are cheap. And I think what we're seeing is a tactical shift, but no strategic shift on either side. I think the US is going to keep up the pressure on the technology and economic controls. And for China's side, I don't think Xi Jinping's strategy has changed at all over the long term. I think this is trying to kind of reduce some of the pressure given how weak China's economy is looking lately.
Okay, so paint us forward 5-10 years' time. What does this relationship look like? What does this ability to provide for chips, for manufacturing, for technological innovation within China look like? Can they have self-determination in that respect?
The administration going into this was really signaling that they see the United States as in a long-term strategic rivalry and competition with the People's Republic of China. And so this meeting was intended to kind of set a floor and stabilize relations. And they kind of signaled very low expectations that they hope to, at the very least, restore some kind of military-to-military communications. So going forward, based on the updates last month that you saw to the export controls on the high-end AI chips, these were really a doubling down by the U.S. administration on those controls and a signaling that they realize that they're in a cat-and-mouse game and that China will adjust to the U.S. controls and continue to seek loopholes. But the administration, in response, will continue to update them in order to try to meet the objective of preventing China from using U.S. high-end chips to accelerate their military development.
Liza, you said a moment ago, words are cheap. I think that's what you said. But we're talking largely in the context of the diplomatic relationship between the US and China. You look at who was in the room Wednesday night, Tim Cook, Hock Tan of Broadcom. It seems as if the private sector, the biggest technology companies in the world, have a very different attitude to China. They just want to do business there.
Beijing is smart. It has a strategy of trying to exploit the gaps and the splits in American society, federal government versus local and state level government, public and private. They realize that we're a democracy and they try to exploit these gaps. However, I think given how increasingly opaque and hostile to foreign businesses the Chinese market is, I don't think you're going to see any kind of strategic rapprochement between the companies. China has moved on beyond the era of reform and opening. That era is over. They still say these words, but I think the reality on the ground is becoming increasingly hostile.
Liza, it's Friday. It's been a long week. What is the most positive outcome from Apec? What is a good thing that's come out of it?
Look, I mentioned that the administration kind of set a low bar for itself, and I think they stepped over those low expectations easily. And there were a few kind of concrete deliverables. One that they're quite, I think, gratified by is an agreement to work with the Chinese on counter-narcotics. And of course, there's a lot of precursor chemicals for fentanyl flowing into the United States, much of it coming through Mexico. And they're signaling that the Chinese are starting to take some actions to crack down on firms that are doing this. And so I think the hope is very modest that at least in the short term, we can save some American lives by limiting the flow of this. So we should expect the cooperation on the Chinese side to turn on and off, depending on how happy they are with other aspects of the relationship. But in the short term, if we can save American lives, I think that's a good thing. It's also good for our militaries to be talking to each other. That's a pretty low bar, but we need to be communicating to avoid some kind of misunderstanding. And then they've also announced that we will start some type of initial discussions with the Chinese about AI risk and safety. And of course, this is something the U.S. is talking to a lot of different partners and allies around the world about, and they'll start doing the same with China.